'cause you have friends. Don't give up, you're not the only one. Don't give up, no reason to be ashamed. Don't give up, you still have us. Don't give up now, we're proud of who you are. Don't give up, you know it's never been easy. Don't give up, 'cause I believe there's a place where we belong.
Hello, everybody. I'm John Self. Welcome to the After Hours. The After Hours, our weekly office hours presentation. And this is the week we've had gremlins in the technology. So if you can hear me, let me know. That would be helpful. For some reason, some of the feedback on the headphones was not working properly earlier today. So with new technology, and live streaming has been around for a while, but they keep improving it and updates, and then the computer gets updated, and sometimes the computer update on the computer doesn't like the update on the application, and so it's just a constant fine tuning device. Let me say a few words first about that video we played, a 17-second video about the senior citizens and the ageism in the workplace. This is without doubt one of the most significant problems today. Racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, gender discrimination, they're all serious and important issues, but especially in today's marketplace. The workplace ageism issue is absolutely critical. So many talented, qualified, capable executives are being overlooked because they're 55 or 60, they have too much gray hair. Sometimes they're getting overlooked because they haven't taken good care of themselves, and we'll talk about that another day. But the important thing is to realize that there's a lot of talent there. Now, if you are in that group and you're struggling to get the breakthrough, let me know, because we do a lot of work with people who are in their mid 50s and up. And there is a way, it's not easy, but there is a way where you can absolutely be more competitive as a senior statesman. You start off, but don't ever put seasoned in your resume. That to a Gen Z or millennial, that just screams that you're old. So let's talk today about something that I think is it's a very common problem, and it affects people and they don't really realize it. And that is, their resume is missing a piece of the puzzle, and that piece of the puzzle it's missing is called value. And so we want to really talk about that, the importance of that concept, and how you can use your existing resume and strengthen its value proposition. Now, this is not going to be a long presentation today because, we ought to be able to cover it in about 30 minutes. But if you have any questions going forward, let me know, and we'll try to do everything we can to answer your questions. If you have a question, you can drop it in the chat box. So I'm going to move over here and so you can see more of the screen. Job applicants, and I've used this quote in the past, but it is so appropriate, that job applicants often fail not because what they don't know, it's because what they know for sure that just ain't so. And a lot of people, it's really difficult. It's really difficult, and the difficulty of adapting is not made any easier by all the El Toro poo-poo that vendors put out on the internet about colorful resumes and fancy formats and cover letters and all this other nonsense. You have to understand that the market is in the midst of a change. It's been going on for quite some time. So let me say, first of all, resume formatting doesn't really help you. Okay. It's the content. As James Carville said during the Clinton administration, it's the economy, stupid. Well, let me tell you something. In your resume, it's the content, stupid. Now, you need to have a resume format that's ATS friendly, and color won't help. And we're going to talk about some of those things. But all of that advertising, all of the bad advice that's out there, it doesn't really help. If you're a lower level employee, knock yourself out. We focus on executives and managers. And I will tell you, as an executive manager, you want a clean looking resume that focuses on your content. Now, telling people what you do is not enough. So let's move and talk about how we can help you elevate your resume with more value. One of the things I want to share with you is that we have a free resume guide. You can get that at johngself.com. And it's in the process of being updated. It's still pretty accurate. There's not anything really grossly inaccurate about it, but there's some things we're adding to it now. But you can still download it. It's free at johngself.com. Click the little membership button on the right side of the page, and it'll take you to our course page, what we call a course portfolio page. We probably should come up with a different phrase so it'd be easier to say. And on that page, you're going to see a variety of courses that including free giveaways. One of those is a resume guide, and we encourage you to download it. If you have any questions about your resume, you can go to the bottom of our homepage. There's a little tab called Talk to John, and schedule a free call. If you're going to schedule a free call, please tell me whether it's about the resume or planning or job search information, that sort of thing, so I can be prepared and be focused when you come on the line. If you schedule a call, your obligation is to initiate it with me unless it's a Zoom call. I prefer Zoom calls, but it's all up to you. Now, one of the things that you'll also see on the cover page, on the course portfolio page, is a couple of examples of how we try to help our clients. One is that the premium page, we have a premium resume review, and where we conduct an in-depth research interview. And that's important because a lot of people bury in their memory banks a lot of their value. We did a newsletter on that, I think, this morning, talking about how candidates really miss opportunities because they don't include information in their resume and in their interviews that will help them differentiate their brand from all of the other hundreds or dozens of other competitors. So we do a research interview to kind of tease out all your value. Then we show you how to overhaul your resume, clean it up, make it more ATS friendly and easier to customize. You're still going to have to customize your resume, even if you're submitting it to through the organization's ATS application and not some neutral job board. You're still going to have to do that. So the premium package is $450. The resume review is $179. If you are a career community member or a subscriber, you get 40% off of those prices, and you get access to other resources as well, including these group coaching sessions are becoming members only events. So you'll have access to 2 weekly coaching sessions every week. And the next thing we have is 4 30-minute telephone calls each month that you can schedule a call, and we answer your questions and provide you support in your search. And then finally, you get an access to our newsletter. It's called Guiding Your Career Report. It's Monday through Friday at 6:30 a.m. Central Time, and it has a variety of issues to kind of help you support yourself in the job search. Occasionally, we'll include something else about bad leadership or good leadership and hat tips to various people. But this information here I think is really relevant, and I encourage you to download the resume guide. And if you have questions, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. Simply give me a call on that using that device on the front page of our homepage of our website. Talk to John at the bottom of the page, and I'm happy to help you. Okay, now our agenda today is what's driving all of this change. I mean, why do people have to make all these changes? And we were doing fine with our resumes 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Why did they have to change all this stuff? And now, how do these changes affect how we handle our resumes? And how does this competition impact that? And then what steps can I take to improve my resume? And then we'll provide you some guiding your career service updates so you'll be aware of those. Okay, one of the reasons for change is automation. You know that starting in the late 1990s, companies trying to save money with their applicant track with the recruiting, talent acquisition, trying to improve the process, eliminate some pretty unfortunate, regrettable biases that some people had about age, ethnicity, and race. So they were trying to get rid of that, and they started using a new device called an applicant tracking system. And like anything else new, it was not a perfect answer. Excuse me. And so it created no end of consternation among job seekers. I mean, it was so frustrating. People began referring to applicant tracking systems as applicant tossing systems. And the truth is, today, when you apply online, because of all the competition, whether you're in healthcare, manufacturing, retail, in some other business sector, the chances of getting a job online are 3 to 5%. If you look at the odds a different way, you're going to have two, three, 400 people apply for a job. And sometimes that is within the first or second day. So your odds are 200, 300 to 1. And that's pretty depressing. And the only way you can compete, okay, is to have a network that can get you introduced into the hiring authority without having to go through the front door and stand in line with everybody else. So we've done a lot of communication, a lot of programs, a lot of writing, a lot of videos on networking and its critical importance. You can view those on our YouTube channel at Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. It's on our YouTube channel, Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. And this replay will be available later this afternoon. Now, one of the reasons, so they were trying to improve efficiency, and secondly, they were trying to, speed up the process. One of the age-old complaints about applicants, whether it was when I started in the mid '90s doing a retained executive search, it was always it takes too long, and some of that's the recruiter, but a lot of that's the client. I always tried to advance everything as fast as I could, but sometimes the clients are just not going to be rushed. They don't have a sense of the importance of how this should go. Oh, I've got a vacation, or some people are going to be out of town, or they've got meetings they don't want to change. And then they get upset because they lose applicants who get picked by somebody else. But let's focus in on a set of more important reasons why things are changing and why you have to adapt to remain competitive. Most people don't know this unless you read my stuff on a regular basis. But one of the real dark secrets of recruiting is that 40% of all the executives and managers that are placed, they're gone. They're forced out, they're pushed out, they quit, or they're sacked within 18 months. Now that's a number that's just shocking to me when I read it the first time, and it was, it was the quote from the then CEO of Heidrick and Struggles, the second largest global search firm in the world. And that he made that confession in an article was just astounding. It was in the Financial Times from London, and it was just amazing. And then I started doing some research. That number was tracked by an organization I think called the Governing Board, and they've been tracking it since the mid 1990s. And guess what? From the mid 1990s until today, that number has not changed that much. That tells me that recruiting is a pretty broken process, and it's the process we got, so it's the process you have to play with. It's the sandbox you're in. But you need to understand that employers are really beginning to push back about recruiting. It's too transactional. There's not a lot of accountability. There's not a lot of reliability. Now, in our firm, when I was running johngself.com or John G. Self Partners and then John March Partners, we had a 3-year placement guarantee. So we were on the line. So we absolutely dug in and we reviewed what we did as transformational search. Most every search you're going to be involved in today is very transactional. Okay. The recruiters aren't your friends. They're trying to get the thing done so they can, add revenue to their bank account. The clients view it as transactional, and that's why we have problems. Now, one of the issues is that these changes have been coming, some of them slowly, and it's sort of like that the proverbial frog in the pan that suddenly you just turn on the water very low and the frog thinks, "Oh man, this is very nice." But before he knows it, as you turn up the heat, he's the hors d'oeuvre. Too many applicants are really not grasping the fact that these dynamic changes in the job market, particularly with their resume, are hurting them, and they're not adapting. And so you must adapt. And the great movie Moneyball, Brad Pitt's line was to the old aging scout who was very angry because they were using computers and he didn't like that. And Billy Bean was the general manager of Oakland then, who had not a lot of money to build a team, and he looked at the scout and he said, "You adapt or you die." And the scout made a couple of unquestionable statements, and Bean fired him. And that's the way it goes. Many employee job postings today are very vague and they're very incomplete, and so people come into the job, and one of the problems is they don't ask the right questions. And so it's not really surprising once you dig into it why the fail rate is so high in recruiting. And you have the obligation to protect yourself. So this is all part of protecting your value. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do your value proposition any good if you go through this ordeal to get a job, not really understand it, not being afraid to ask the question because you don't want to upset anybody. Then you get into a job that is not exactly as you perceived it to be. And then you're asked to leave sometimes within 6-8 months, usually, 40%, it's 18 months. So you have to be very, very careful, and you have to be sure that you're asking a lot of questions of the prospective employer. Okay, now here's one of the big things that's changing, and I say it all the time, still to this day. And over my 27-year career, I've looked at thousands and thousands of resumes, and I will tell you that the problem is the content is there, but the value is always lacking. Okay, so this is a great opportunity for you as a candidate in a very noisy, jostling, competitive marketplace to differentiate yourself. And that is with your resume, which is, incidentally, as you probably heard, your first interview. Now, what's really ironic about that statement about this is your first interview is that you're not there, and typically the client's not there. It's a computer. So let's focus on what you can do and how you can change. You don't have to tear your resume apart. You need to change the perspective. Okay. Credentials, yes, they're still important. A lot of industries, if you're going to move into leadership, they're going to be looking to see that you have a master's degree in business administration or some relevant field. Your experience, they want to know that you've had the requisite number of years of experience. This is important stuff because it reflects that you can do the job. But here's the issue. People spend a lot of time in their resume using scope of responsibility statements. I supervised 4,000 employees. Great. That's a scope of responsibility statement. It is not a value statement. Okay. I supervised a company with 500 million in assets. Great. But that's not a value statement. If you double the value of the company, now that is an accomplishment. That is value. If you reduced overhead for the company, that's value. If you reduced turnover, something most companies don't even talk about. If you reduce turnover, there's a calculation that can show you how much money you save the organization. Those are all accomplishments. Those are all value statements. But being over a company with 14 counties and 3,000 people, that's not a value statement. That's a scope of responsibility statement. Please understand those two. there's and understand this. A lot of times you can take a scope of responsibility statement and convert it into a value statement. Okay, your content must clearly reflect your value creating accomplishments. And if you don't, or if you know, a lot of times people think that they do, and then you read it and you go, okay, so what did you accomplish? Well, I did this or that. People are still hung up on their scope of responsibility. Okay. So you want to be sure that you reflect your value creating accomplishments. Okay. And these things, you know, they need to reflect quantifiable successes. Now, sometimes you can't do that and you can say anecdotal successes. Now, I'm going to stop here for a minute and tell you that if you're not keeping a journal, you're really, really setting yourself up to be limited. Why? Most people think that, well, I'll remember what I did. Well, guess what? No, you won't. And I will add a personal testimony. There is a correlation between what I've forgotten and the color of my hair. Okay. And so I've always kept a journal. I've been doing that for probably 20, 30 years or 35 years, about things I did, people I met, accomplishments I achieved, things that I thought were really important, observations about how I could do things better. Matthew McConaughey is also a big, big journal writer. And in his book Green Lights, which is an excellent book, and I encourage you to read it, he talks about the value of journaling. And what journaling allows you to do is not only develop your thoughts, develop your ideas and concepts, but also to maintain a record of your accomplishments with detail. Okay. You cannot remember the detail. I can't tell you how many times I've done interviews, and I would go back in a job that was maybe 6 years ago. I would say, so how many days of cash on hand did you have? I don't remember. Well, what was your turnover rate? I don't remember. After about the third or fourth time of I don't remember, that's a real big kind of that makes me very apprehensive. If I'm going to refer an applicant with three or four others to a client to hire, and I'm going to be on the string for 3 years, both tenure and performance, I will tell you that that's not something that you're when you keep saying I don't remember, I don't know, you're taking yourself out of consideration. If you have a journal, this will become incredibly invaluable to help you strengthen your resume, strengthen your interview performance, and it allows you also to develop your thoughts. People like Jack Welch, the late Jack Welch, who was an outstanding leader at GE during its heyday, and others talked about the importance of journaling in their career development and how beneficial it was to them. I once had a hospital CEO said, "No, I don't want to do that. It might get subpoenaed." That's just nonsense. Okay, you're not going to. I've never heard anybody had their journal uh, uh, subpoenaed in a case. Okay, so let's look across this and talk about how you insert value. And there's three basic areas on your resume: your contact information and your profile, that professional summary at the top of the page. You have your work experience and scope of responsibilities, and then you have then you have your accomplishments. Under each applicant, you have all of your accomplishments. Now, let's talk about your contact information. First of all, I have seen resumes that had more credentials across the top that I kept thinking, this person, how do they have time to do their job? They're dabbling. Okay, some people are just enjoy getting credentials. The problem is if you start flashing them, and it's like a tin horn dictator with all those medals all over his outfit, his regalness. You go, okay, is that really meaningful, or is that just for show? Let me tell you something. A lot of people are not impressed by how many credentials they have. They're impressed by, do you have relevant credentials? Um, One mistake people make on their resume is they put MHA, Masters of Hospital Administration, or MBA after their name. That's not a credential. That's a degree. Now, if you have a doctorate, that's a credential. If you're a CPA, that's a credential. If you're a fellow in the American College of Healthcare Executives, that's a credential. Putting American College of Healthcare Executives after your name shows that you're just not a prime timer. That's an organization name, and that's not a credential. So you need to make that differentiation. Somebody says, "Well, they're asking for masters, and I want the scanner to see it." It's going to see it if you put it in your profile, profile summary. A master's prepared executive with 20 plus years experience. Now you've covered, if they're looking for 20 years experience, now you've covered two essential elements of what the computer's looking for, and it's not going to read it any more effectively in body type as it is in the headline type. So streamline the top of your resume with your contact information. Don't put stuff up there that doesn't really belong up there. So that's just a, and if and you create value by honing in your credentials to show people this is what I'm really good at, and I'm really a professional. If you put a lot of stuff up there, if you put a lot of degrees up there, it covers up the important stuff. Too much is too much. Okay. My wife likes to tell me, John, less is more. And so I'm telling you, less is more. Put the relevant credential up there. I had a one candidate once that had her name was on the far left hand side of the resume, and then her credentials went all the way across to the right hand side. And in classic Jack Welch terminology, that woman was a dabbler, and she didn't make the cut because she spent she spent so much time keeping up with her credentials that she really didn't have a depth of understanding of the area that we were really concerned with. Okay. Now, in your profile, that profile must reflect what the client is looking for. I will tell you this, that recruiters, retained recruiters doing high level searches, I primarily did C-suite or executive level searches. We're not using scanners. We are looking at the resumes, or our researchers are looking at the resumes, and by hand. Oh, that's a novel idea, right? And so one of the things I always did when we're going through the resumes initially, we're going to give it about 20-30 second look, because we've got maybe 40 or 50 to look at. I've had as many as 150 to go through. Okay. And so what we're going to read really quickly is the professional summary. And so the professional summary should address what we're looking for. So that's why, even without a computer scanner, interfering with your advancement, just a resume for a CEO or a recruiter, it needs to be customized and focused for the job you're applying for. Okay. That's a value creation. That's a foundational value, that you're making it easy for the recruiter to see who you are, that you're qualified. If you've got everything, if you tick all the boxes off in that summary, and then we're going to set you aside for we need more review, spend more time with this resume. If it doesn't do that in the professional profile, if it's manually reviewed, it goes in the trash can. A lot of organizations don't save. If you're really exceptional, they may save the resume. But if you have a profile that's just generic and doesn't get you past the front door, no, we're not going to save that. So make the profile relevant to the job you're applying for, and be sure you understand what they're looking for. Read carefully, and then use some of the keywords and phrases. Even if you're not going through the computer, it still helps the recruiters. Okay. And you want to be sure that if you have won awards, if you are a highly recognized individual, you want to very subtly put that in there. Okay, in the summary, strong community leader, or recognized community leader. Recognized for innovation, professional accolades, that sort of thing. You don't want to put too much, just enough to whet the appetite of the recruiter to say, this person's done good stuff for the organization and the community. Okay. Now, the professional summary, you don't want it to go on forever and ever. So you want to write it, and you want to rewrite it. You want to be sure it's the best it can be, and targeted it can be, and shares your value. Talk about somebody who's consistently, over 27 years of experience, has consistently achieved or exceeded goals, consistently achieved the results that they were asked to achieve. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for that you finish projects ahead of schedule, that you save money, you reduced overhead, you improve satisfaction, customer satisfaction, you enhance employee engagement. Those are all things that can really be beneficial and add value to your resume. Okay. Now, if you've done innovative programs, you want to reference those throughout your resume anytime you can. And if you've had industry awards, anytime you can do that, you want to include that. If it's relevant to a particular job, you want to put that, reference it again in that job area where you're listing all your work experience. Now, the work experience and scope of responsibilities. We recommend very, very strongly that you put the name of the company and the location, and then a short description, 2 or 3 sentences of what the company did. People don't do that, and it's problematic because we're trying to figure out, this is the name. What the hell do they do? Is this relevant to the job we're recruiting for? Make it easy. Okay, that's really something that's important. Explain the company's products, services, if it's an award-winning company, if it's a leader in the market, if it's a nationally recognized company. It's okay to put that in the description of the company. Why? Because you want people to know that you've worked for the best of the best. Okay, so if you have the opportunity to work for a great company, don't hide it under a bushel basket. Now, you put your title and responsibility, and this is where you include the number of direct reports you have, your expense and revenue budgets, and how many locations did you supervise. And that's important if you're looking for a job that requires multi-site management experience. So that's where you want to put it in, and describing your scope of responsibility. And that's where you're going to talk about your budgets and the number of people. And this has got to be a well written, tightly written summary. Okay. Because when you start listing the bullet points, we don't want to see, I supervised 21,000 people. That's not an accomplishment. And so what happens when you put all that garbage in with your accomplishments, people overlook stuff. Okay. And you can even confuse the computer. So separate your scope of responsibility statements and your accomplishments. This is one of the most common ongoing errors that people make. I wish people would read the memo. Don't do that because it hurts you. Never, ever mix scope of responsibility statements with accomplishments. You're trying to hide your accomplishments. Now, here's a tip. Some scope statements, as I said earlier, can be flipped to accomplishments. Okay. So think about this. I supervised a $200 million building expansion. Great. That's a scope of responsibility statement. But that if you delivered that building project on schedule or under budget, absolutely, that's an accomplishment. Okay. I supervised 21,000 employees. Great. That's a scope of responsibility statement. But I reduced overhead, or I reduced turnover by 15 or 20%. Now there are formulas that you can use to calculate what's the average salary in the people that in that group, the group cohort. Do the math on what if you reduced it by 20% of how many employees, how many people stayed that might have left, and you can do the math and come up with the amount of money you saved by reducing turnover. That's what you have to do to add value to your resume. You can't just sit back and say, I don't remember, and so you don't do anything about it. You look for credible, honorable ways to enhance your value, and you can use some calculations. And they may be somewhat an estimate, but it's got to be based on fact. Okay, it's got to be based on some criteria that's reasonable and that is accurate. But then if you can't, well, I don't remember how much money we saved. CFO never told me. You can come up with a reasonable estimation. Okay, and if you don't do that, somebody else is going to. So why put yourself at a disadvantage? Be honorable. Be honest. Okay, don't let your desire to get a job, compromise your integrity. And just because you don't remember it, it's very acceptable to go back and look at the number of people that worked for you, and you can remember pretty much what the salary ranges were, especially if you kept a journal, and you can say, okay, that was by reducing the turnover rate. That was 300 people that didn't go looking for another job, and the average salary was $52,000. And so you can get the number, and it's credible. It's a credible number, and it's a number that you just didn't yank out of this blue sky. So that's one way that you can add value to that. Sometimes you have to do the work that to put the value together. So always look at your accomplishments for ways that you can strengthen them with honor, integrity, okay, and make them stronger. That is extremely important. Now, I want to tell you something. One of the big problems, especially with people of my ilk, the Xers in my age, they tend to self-edit themselves. I don't feel comfortable saying that. If you're overly modest, Why don't you just go get a lawn chair and sit on the sidelines? I don't want you to lie. I don't want you to beat your chest and be a cocky SOB. But what I do want you to do is to think about the things you achieved. That's why a research interview can be very, very helpful. We have an interview course that's a master class in interviewing. I've been teaching interview courses for gosh, for years. And when you've interviewed as many people as I have, you kind of know what a bad interview is. I'm sorry, the winds were blowing earlier this morning. It's cold as heck in Texas, but the allergies are still out there and out and about. But we do a research interview. Why? Because we're looking for opportunities to extract the value, tease more value from that individual. Why? Because they probably won't stand up and talk about what they've accomplished because A, they were taught not to brag when they were growing up, or they don't feel comfortable being a chest beating, self-aggrandizement model. You have to promote yourself. One of my clients early on in my practice was a wonderfully talented communicator. She's now in Houston, but I will tell you that one of the great things she said to me was, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. And she had done all these things. And when I started talking to her, she would talk about it. But if I just asked her to tell me why we should hire her, she never did that. She always talked about how many years experience she had. Well, I'm hiring experience, but I'm also hiring what did you accomplish? Okay. And I finally stopped. I said, Victoria, when you were growing up, who was your biggest champion? She smiled. She said, my mom. I said, that is so great. Moms are wonderful. And they pick you up and dust you off. And when somebody's done something bad to you, they give you a hug and a kiss and try to help you, kind of get things back on track. But Victoria, there's a problem. Your mom can't be with you in the interview room. If you don't tell them, they're not going to know. And some people said, but it's in my resume. If you don't tell them, they may overlook it. So it's important to really, understand your value and don't self-edit. Okay? More people hurt their chances by self-editing. So, one of the things I wanted to cover before we wrapped up today is avoid the flashy designs with boxes, multicolors, text boxes, use of headers and footers, all that stuff. Why? Because your value that you work so hard to create, excuse me, the value that you work so hard to put into that resume diminishes to zero if it's eliminated by ATS. Now, when you submit ZipRecruiter, iHire, Indeed, all those things, they use a form of applicant tracking systems. A lot of the jobs right now, if they're management executive jobs that show up there, a lot of them are just phantom jobs. Companies are paying to keep them up, to keep their name in front of the marketplace in case things improve. The white collar recession is still in place. There's still thousands and thousands of people trying to find jobs in that management executive cohort. And with all the indecision now with the new incoming administration and the threat of tariffs and trade wars, everybody's keeping their powder dry. So a lot of companies they've not yet opened the door to hiring. And even if they do, it's going to take 12 to 18 months to absorb the incredibly large inventory of talent that we already have in the marketplace. So if you're out there looking and you think that, oh, the new guy's here and it's going to change everything overnight, that's craziness. Keep the pedal to the metal, as they used to say, and keep working your job search. Okay. Because you want to be sure that you're doing the resume the right way. So there's a lot of information. The resume guide I mentioned to you at the outset is a good tool to help you. If you have questions, please call me. I hate to see people spend all of this time and effort and then not hear anything because their resume got kicked out early on in the process and they never know. Okay, the keywords and phrases that we've heard about. You know what those do? If you've got a resume that you've really built your value into it, you've taken time to really think about it, or you hired somebody to help you create more value for your resume, by using keywords and phrases that are geared to the job you're applying for, okay, it helps the scanner to recognize your value. Okay. If you don't use keywords, the scanner is just going to blur through there and you're not going to get picked. Okay. The keywords are the triggers that help the scanner to, to do the processing correctly. Now, it's something you need to know, because some of these websites, they're absolutely, I think it's just almost outrageous. They're trying to sell this stuff in today's environment. Some ATS systems do not recognize text boxes. Okay. That's, where you create the box and you write the text in the box. Okay. Some of them can't read that. Some of them are on some ATS systems, the older ones, are unable to decipher graphics or information in headers or footers. So don't put your contact information in the header or the footer. Okay. Don't put American flags. Don't use pictures. Those are things that will screw up the ATS scanner. Now, some of the newer scanners, they're getting better. Okay. Another thing, use Microsoft Word docx. Just because you read something on the internet, the one thing, if you start looking to the internet for advice, that's fine. It's really got a lot of great meaty information, but you need to look and see, when was it when was that posted? And sometimes they'll say use PDF. Well, PDF used to be great in the 90s and the 2000s. Why? Because a lot of hospitals had not updated their Microsoft operating system, had not updated their Word system. So sometimes you would have a newer version of Word, the Word program, than the hospital or the company. Those organizations are notorious about, if they've got something that's working, they don't want to tear it up, because it's connected to everything. And so a lot of people, they would look at their resumes after, the recruiter would say, can you send me something to me directly? That's your formatting's messed up. Okay. That was because you were dealing with older models of Microsoft Word, and it's trying to move it into the hospital's format, and it wasn't, or the company's format, it wasn't working. And so a lot of times we recommended people use PDF, because PDF is a picture display format that allowed the formatting to be locked in. Well, now you need to understand that some systems don't completely read PDF formatting. So you want to go back to docx and use that if it's entirely possible. Okay. If you use a cover letter, never include key information in the letter that is not in your resume. Now, let me confess something. When I did CEO searches, and I did a lot of CEO searches for major academic facilities and also community hospitals, and then smaller rural hospitals, it was not uncommon to get 200 to 300 resumes, for a search. Because once the people heard that it was available, I'd get resumes from everywhere. Some of them were clearly not qualified, and they were eliminated right away. But once we started processing them, then we tried to stay in touch with them. I never read a cover letter until I selected from, say, we had 75 people apply. We would kind of screen all those resumes and get it down to about 20 that we were going to do initial screening interviews. When the research team got it down from 20 to about, we ready to cut it down to about 10 or 15, that's when I read the cover letter, because I wanted to see if they could write, okay, if they could communicate themselves. But I didn't have time to read 70, 50, 75 cover letters, okay? And so, but in those days, they were really valuable, and we read them, but we never made a decision about including a candidate into a search based on a cover letter. Okay. We made a decision based on, did they have the relevant skills? Did they have the relevant value, the accomplishments? Did we believe they could do this job? Could they adapt to this culture? Okay. So be sure that you don't put important information into a cover letter that you don't have in your resume. And don't assume that just because you live in a northeastern state, that automatically implies that you have leadership experience with a heavily unionized workforce. If you don't mention it, you assume the recruiter is going to understand it. How would they know? They might not know. And one person once said, well, you should have called me. I can't call 75 people when I was recruiting. You need to be sure it's in your resume. That's part of the value creation process. You add value to the resume by being sure that your resume addresses all of the issues that they're looking for. Now, I understand some of these job summaries appear to be written by the laziest people God ever put on this earth. And they're totally, they're just devoid of any substantive material. And then most people are so afraid to ask questions they might feel are controversial, they don't ask, and then they get caught in a jackpot. you're doing this to yourself. So, we teach people how to, at what point they can ask certain questions and get the information they need, because that's going to help them interview better. But if you use a cover letter, be sure that it doesn't that it includes all the relevant information that's in your resume. Okay, don't get carried away. Keep it simple. Now, understand this: some ATS scanners will not completely, assimilate what you've written in your cover letter. So my advice is, unless the employer, if you're submitting online, unless the employer requests a cover letter, don't send it to them. Matter of fact, we used to advise people not to even send a formatted resume. Use a basic text resume, because that was the safest way to get it through the ATS system. Well, the systems are a little bit better now, and that's not necessarily the right path. But what I would tell people is, if you get a call and the recruiter said, "We want to set up a screening interview," great. Listen, I have updated and formatted my resume. And we sent you a plain text for the computer, but I have a formatted resume that's a lot easier to read. May I send that to you? And most of the time, like 99%, the recruiter will say, "Oh, yes, please." That's when you can send a cover letter, okay? Because they're going to give you their email address, and boom, you're off to the races. So that's a good technique to kind of do that. Listen, we're coming up on 50 minutes. I hope this has been helpful information to you. I really want to thank you for being with us today, and we hope that you'll come back and join us next Tuesday at noon for Lunch and Learn. We'll be promoting those sessions over the weekend, and again, if you have questions, schedule a call. Okay. Listen, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. I'm just as reticent as you are about to do something, because you're afraid you're just going, the wrath of sales are going to come down on you. We're content marketers. If you like what we do, if you like our information, if you think we know what we're doing, then talk to us, hire us. Okay. If you don't like our content, if you don't like the way I talk or the way I look, that's fine. We're not going to cover you up with 7 emails a day. God have mercy on the person that thought that was a good idea. So anyway, please schedule a call if you have questions. Don't keep doing the same thing. If you're submitting resumes and you're not getting calls, stop, because it's not automatically going to get better. We can help you figure out what's going on and how you can stop that rejection, without notice syndrome. Okay. So please reach out. If not us, somebody else that you trust that can give you the information. The white collar recession is going to continue probably through most of this next year, unless something really changes. And I will say that, across the board tariffs are not a good sign. Okay. And Canada, my wife is Canadian, so she has close friends that are fairly connected to fairly influential people in Canada. And I assure you, Trudeau, although he has resigned, he's still in power. And if they put tariffs on Canada that hurt Canada, they will come back with full throat and hurt the U.S. with their own tariffs. And there's a lot of trade that goes back and forth, including a lot of oil. So unless you want to see inflation jump up. So that's one reason, just that indecision. I wish the current president Godspeed. I don't want anything bad to happen, but that's the reason a lot of things aren't changing yet. There's not a lot of rush to the economy. Yes, businesses are optimistic. They're excited, but most businesses are not going into full throat hiring yet, because they're waiting to see how this is going to play out. And they don't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to do a big layoff, because that's more embarrassing. So listen, thanks everybody. I really do appreciate you being with us today. This will be available on YouTube later today. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you on Tuesday for Lunch and Learn.